Easy, you're with me, we go left. Ready, Lassen, you go right. Pull your boots, gentlemen, and bon appetit.
In June 1940, Prime Minister Winston Churchill gave orders to the Special Operations Executive to set Europe ablaze. In this episode of WW2 Wayfinder, I look at Operation Postmaster, the true story behind the new film, The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, from Director Guy Ritchie.
Und das ist meine Frau!
It's very good.
The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare comes to Prime Video on the 25th of July. So after you've seen this episode, make sure you go and watch it. In 1941, the British Admiralty received reports that German U-boats were refueling and making repairs in the rivers of Vichy French Africa. In response, the small-scale raiding force, SSRF, also known as No. 62 Commando, was dispatched to investigate. Formed that same year, the SSRF was a small unit of 55 commando-trained personnel led by Major Gus March Phillips. They operated with the Special Operations Executive, or SOE, under the control of Combined Operations Headquarters. The SSRF's transport for the raid was the 65-ton Brixham yacht trawler named Maid Honour. On August 9th, 1941, Major March Phillips and a 5-man crew departed from Poole in Dorset for West Africa. The rest of the SSRF, led by Captain Geoffrey Appleyard, had left earlier on a troop transport ship. The Maid Honour was only large enough to accommodate a total of 11 men. So Major March Phillips chose his men with great care. His second in command was his trusted friend, Captain Geoffrey Appleyard, who already held the Military Cross from an earlier SOE operation. The two men first met in 1940 among the sand dunes of Dunkirk while waiting to be evacuated from the beaches. At that time, March Phillips was an artillery officer and Appleyard was serving with the Royal Army Service Corps. When the commandos were formed shortly thereafter, both men were among the first to volunteer. While serving with 7 Commando, they were both recruited by the SOE in early 1941. March Phillips was then instructed to form a special service unit, with Appleyard as his deputy, to train for specialist amphibious operations. Now, with their training complete, this mission was the unit's first opportunity to prove its value in operational conditions. After 6 weeks at sea, Maid Honour arrived at Freetown, Sierra Leone, on September the 20th, 1941. Here they met up with Appleyard's party, which had arrived at the end of August. Once reunited, the SSRF began searching the coastline for U-boat refueling bases and submarines, but their efforts were unsuccessful. Despite the unsuccessful search, the SOE maintained a presence in West Africa to monitor Vichy French, Spanish and Portuguese territories, aiming to identify and hinder any activities that threatened British colonial properties. During their efforts to locate German submarine bases, SOE agents discovered 3 vessels in the port of Saint Isabel on the Spanish island of Fernando Po, located 20 miles off the coast of Africa near the borders of Nigeria and Guinea. The 3 targeted ships were the Italian 8,500-ton merchant vessel Duchessa d'Aosta, the large German tug Licomba and the diesel-powered barge Bibundi. The Duchesse d'Aosta posed a significant threat due to its operational radio, which could be used to transmit information about Allied naval or merchant shipping movements to Axis submarines or surface raiders, potentially leading to attacks on and the sinking of these ships. The declared cargo of the Duchesse d'Aosta was made up of benign materials, such as copra, crude asbestos fibre, and ingots of electrolytic copper. However, and curiously, the first page of the ship's cargo manifest was not presented to port authorities, and the ship's captain refused to provide any details. This led to the speculation that the vessel might also be carrying arms, ammunition, and parts for Axis military vehicles. Seizing ships in a neutral harbour was highly controversial, so British authorities in the area initially refused to support the raid. However, permission was eventually granted by London for the operation to proceed. The raid was scheduled for late in the evening of January the 14th, 1942. chosen for its darkest night with no moon. The plan was timed while the ship's officers would be ashore attending a dinner party arranged by SOE agent Richard Lippett. With the green light given for the raid, the plan could now be put into action. The first step was for SOE agent Richard Lippett to secure a job with the shipping company John Holt & Co. of Liverpool, which had business offices on the island. Successfully obtaining the position and establishing himself on the island, Lippett began preparations for the raid while staying alert for useful information. Through his position, Lippett learned that the crew of the Duchessa d'Aosta often attended parties ashore and had hosted their own party aboard the ship on January 6, 1942. By posing as a partygoer, Lippett managed to gather crucial insider information about the ship's readiness for sea, crew numbers and watch arrangements. This intelligence was vital for planning the next steps of the operation. A few days later, on the morning of January 11, 1942, the raiders, led by March Phillips, left Lagos in their 2 tugs and headed for San Isabel Harbour. During the journey, they practiced lowering the foal boats, folding kayaks used by the SOE and other British Special Forces, and boarding the ships under the supervision of Captain Graham Hayes. By 23:30, the tugs were positioned approximately 200 yards outside the harbour. Meanwhile, ashore, Lippett had arranged for the 12 Italian officers from the Duchessa d'Aosta and the 2 German officers from Licomba to attend a dinner party, ensuring they would be away from their ships. Additionally, the governor was to be distracted by a honey trap. With these arrangements in place, the stage was set for the operation. As the tugs entered the harbour, the boarding parties assembled on the decks. Vulcan, carrying March Phillips and Appleyard, headed towards the Duchessa d'Aosta. As they approached, they noticed men on the ship's deck shining a light toward the tug, but there was no further response. At the same time, folding kayaks under the command of Hayes launched from the tug Nuneaton, paddled towards Licomba and Bibundi, which were moored next to each other. The operation was now in full swing, with all parties moving toward their targets. When challenged by the watch on Bibundi, the crew replied that they were bringing the ship's captain back from the dinner party. The men on the canoes then boarded Bibundi, causing the 2-man crew on watch to jump overboard. Next, explosive charges were planted on the anchor chain, and the commandos guided Nuneaton alongside Licomba to tow both ships. Once everything was in place, the charges were detonated, and Nuneaton began towing Licomba out of the harbour. Meanwhile, on the Duchessa d'Aosta, 11 men had boarded from Vulcan. One group planted explosive charges on the anchor chains, while another searched below decks, capturing the crew. After setting off the explosives on the anchor chains, the tug Vulcan began towing Duchessa d'Aosta out of harbour. The explosions woke the local population, who gathered on the pier to watch the ship's departure. Surprisingly, no one attempted to stop them, and the harbour's defensive guns remained silent. Instead, some anti-aircraft guns opened fire on imaginary targets, as their crews mistakenly believed Santa Isabella was under air attack. The entire mission lasted just 30 minutes, with no casualties among the raiding teams. On January 15th, 1942, once out at sea, Major March Phillips established watches and placed guards on the 29 prisoners. That evening, both tugs encountered engine trouble, and there were issues with the tow ropes connected to the captured vessels. Despite these challenges, the next day, Vulcan successfully rendezvoused with and was captured by HMS Violet. Meanwhile, Nuneaton managed to contact a Nigerian collier, prompting a ship to be sent from Lagos to tow them in. Back in London, the reaction to the mission was quite positive. The SOE had clearly demonstrated its capability to plan and execute operations regardless of the political consequences. Hugh Dalton, the Minister of Economic Warfare in charge of SOE, explained to Prime Minister Winston Churchill that other neutral governments would be impressed that Britain would, if needed, disregard the legal formalities of war in their efforts to succeed. The head of SOE's Africa station remarked to SOE Chief Colin Gubbins that perhaps next time it will not be necessary for prolonged negotiations before undertaking a 30-minute operation. As predicted, the Spanish government was furiously indignant about the ship's departures, viewing them as a breach of Spain's neutrality. The foreign minister described the operation as an attack on Spanish sovereignty and even threatened to respond with force of arms. In Germany, a radio broadcast claimed that a British warship destroyer had entered the harbour, blown up the ship's anchor cables and shot the ship's crew. The January 21, 1942 edition of the Volkischer Beobachter published an article with the headline, British denials, Admiralty lies on acts of piracy. In response, the Admiralty stated, in view of the German allegations that Allied naval forces have executed a cutting-out operation against Axis ships in the Spanish ports of Santa Isabella, Fernando Po, the British Admiralty considers it necessary to state that no British or Allied ships were in the vicinity. As a result of the German broadcast, the British Commander-in-Chief dispatched reconnaissance patrols to cover the area. A report has now been received that a large, unidentified vessel had been sighted, and British naval vessels are proceeding to the spot to make investigations. The British patrols found the Duchessa d'Aosta in difficulties, boarded and captured the ship, and took it to Lagos in Nigeria, arriving on January the 21st, 1942. To cover up what had happened, the Foreign Office questioned why the Spanish authorities were claiming that British forces were involved in the departure of the vessels, when no British warships had been in the area. The Spanish were told that it appeared that the crews of the vessels had become frustrated by their prolonged stay in Fernando Po and perceived harassment by Spanish authorities, who seemed to be troubling men who had left the ships to live ashore. The crews had obviously taken matters into their own hands, mutinied and sailed the vessels out of Santa Isabella harbour. Without the guidance of their officers, they encountered difficulties controlling the vessels once at sea. According to this story, it was at this point that British patrol ships came upon the Axis vessels, boarded them, and sailed them to the nearest British port. Richard Lepet, who had remained on Fernando Po, was taken in for questioning by the Spanish authorities. He successfully convinced them that he had had no involvement in the departure of the ships and had not spent any money on the party of the ship's officers. Although he was released, he was denied permission to leave the island. Eventually, Lepet managed to escape secretly by canoe, reaching British territory on March 1, 1942. In recognition of their roles in the operation, Major Gus March Phillips was awarded the Distinguished Service Order. Captain Graham Hayes received the Military Cross, Captain Geoffrey Appleyard was given a bar to his Military Cross, and both Richard Lepet and John Guise were awarded membership of the Order of the British Empire. Private Anders Lassen, the only professional sailor and the team's hunter-killer on the raid, was commissioned as a lieutenant and was also awarded the Military Cross. Tragically, March Phillips, Hayes, Appleyard and Lassen were all killed in action during subsequent raids later on in the war. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode of World War II Wayfinder, looking at the true story of Operation Postmaster, the story that the film The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare is based upon. And you can watch it on Prime Video from the 25th of July.